Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Fuller. As chair of the board, I welcome you to this March 15th, 2022 working session of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners. Our communications manager, Emily Kaiser, will describe how our meetings operate, how to access the agenda and packet, and how people may participate remotely. Emily.
Thanks, Commissioner. So there are multiple ways to make public comment during today's meeting, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. If you are here in person and would like to make public comment, please fill out a sign-in sheet now. If you are joining us virtually, we will ask you to virtually raise your hand at the appropriate time in the agenda. If you're joining us virtually, the chat feature on this Zoom meeting is available only as technical support for users on their computer or smartphone. If you are experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, please submit a comment in the chat feature and I will help you troubleshoot. If you're a staff member experiencing issues, please contact the IT help desk for assistance. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. A link to the video recording will be posted to wcroads.org in the coming days. There are printed copies of today's working session agenda on the table here, and it is also posted to wcroads.org. There's a link available in the chat if you're joining us from your computer or smartphone. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Emily. That was me. Call this meeting to order and ask Aaron to call the roll.
Chair Barb Fuller.
Present.
Vice Chair Rod Green.
Here.
Commissioner Douglas Fuller.
Present.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Here.
Commissioner Joanne McCullum.
Present.
Managing Director Cheryl Siddle.
Here.
Director of Engineering and County Highway Engineer Matt McDonald.
Present.
Director of Operations Jim Harmon.
Present.
And Director of Finance and IT Dan Ackerman.
Here.
Thank you, Aaron. This is the time for public participation in the meeting. This is the time set aside to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board. Emily will describe how to do that.
Thanks, Commissioner. So since this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual attendees, we'll take turns between those attending in person and virtually. For virtual attendees, we'll ask that you virtually raise your hand now. If you're viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand by clicking the Participants or Reactions button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raised Hand button. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, raise your hand by dialing *9. I will unmute virtual participants with raised hands one at a time. I will announce your username or the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Please share your name and address before beginning your comments. For in-person attendees, we will start with those who have signed up on the sign-in sheet as you walked in. If you didn't sign in, you're still welcome to make comment. I'll notify you when it's your turn. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to share their comments with the board. I'll announce who has been unmuted either by the person's username or the last 4 digits of your phone number and start the timer.
Thank you, Emily. At this time, do we have any members of the public who wish to address the board?
At this time, Commissioner, no one has signed in and we don't have any virtual hands.
Thank you. We will move along in the agenda and I'll ask Managing Director Cheryl Siddle to take the ball and move us forward here. Topic. So we're trying to just give you a little overview and a flavor of what it is that traffic and safety does. If there's different topics that we need to go or you'd like more information about, we would be happy to come back and do a more in-depth presentation on that particular topic. We did that just recently with the neighborhood traffic management program, and we are more than happy to do that if there's other areas within traffic and safety that interest you or that you'd like to learn more about, and we'd be happy to come back and do a more in-depth. But for right now, we're just going to go fast and furious through the overview of traffic and safety. So Brent?
Yep.
All set? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, board, for allowing me to come in and do a little overview of traffic and safety. Like Cheryl said, there's a lot of areas that we have that we cover, and we touch a lot of areas within the road commission, even outside of the organization.
Please introduce yourself
Oh,
for the
yeah,
record.
sure. Brent Schleck, the Assistant Director of Engineering. And I do apologize. I may be looking at my screen because I do have some notes. So if I'm not looking at you, that's what I'm doing. Okay, yep, there we go. So what the agenda that we're going to have today is who is traffic and safety and what we do, some interesting facts, and then we'll go through some policies that we have at this board or that we've adopted, and some procedures that we follow. So first off, I'll go through our team. So this is, granted, I know that most can't see it, but we'll kind of drill down here. Go ahead, Emily. So that was the whole organization. This is just the engineering department. And then as you drill down, this is the traffic and safety. And then I'll kind of go through each individual person within that team. So we'll start with our sign shop. So Julie Nixon, she's our foreman. And then we have a group leader of Tim Andrews and John Lopez. Julie has been, with the road commission, I think it's 28 years now today, is her anniversary. But she has had several roles within the organization, and she's a great fit for our sign shop. She's a great team. We are looking for individuals. We do have a vacancy within that group, but they're a great team. They work great together, and they help maintain our signs. And we'll go through a slide on some of those, the number of signs we have on our roadway. If you can go to the next slide. So then we have our signals unit. Jeff Young oversees our signals unit. He's our signal engineer. And then with his team, we have a signal electrician. So in order to maintain the signals for MDOT, we were required to have an electrician, and Tim Coakley is our electrician. Then we have 3 technicians on the team. Norwood Bush is probably our lead technician. He has the most experience. Then we've just recently hired John Vesper, and then Matt Oleski. He's our newest member of the team, and he'll actually start here next week on the team. So he was on our night crew. We had recently had a vacancy, and he filled that vacancy, but he wanted to fulfill his duty with the night crew. And then we have our engineering technicians. Scott Burby is one of our technicians. He has come from the operations side. And then Mark Fenelon is another technician that actually worked within the sign shop. Becky Hool, she almost runs the traffic and safety department, I would think. She has come through being a clerk all the way up into an engineering technician, and does a great job, helps us with our designs, helps us with managing our policies and our traffic control orders and what have you. So this is our technician team. Then the next slide. Then you have our administration, which is myself, Samantha Smith. She's our engineering clerk. She not only supports traffic and safety, but all of engineering. She also supports front desk when needed. She helps us make sure that we keep our records in order, make sure that our electronic files are in order. We have a lot of lists within traffic and safety, I'd say even within engineering department, and she helps us stay organized. Elena, she's a vital part of traffic and safety, and I'd say for engineering in general. She helps manage projects. She looks at our traffic impact studies for the organization for whenever development comes in. She helps run our traffic count program. So she does quite a bit for traffic and safety, helps review our crash reviews when we investigate crashes. So she's another vital part of traffic and safety and the organization itself. Then with that, you can go to the next slide. So now we'll kind of go through what we do. So before you go to the next slide, well, I guess that's fine. That's all right. So as Cheryl kind of alluded to, traffic and safety, we're kind of a support team. So we support every section within engineering and every department. From our own department, we perform detailed plan reviews. We do designs. We help the front desk for assistance whenever residents call. Which they call a lot about different aspects within traffic and safety. We work with finance, with our inventory and insurance claims, and then also our operations department, either from our technology within traffic and safety to designing detours for their work. So we kind of touch every aspect with the organization. So you can go to the next slide. So we put this in. So road safety is everyone's responsibility. So the reason we have this is, and I know I've talked about it in some of my other presentations, it's engineering, enforcement, and education, those 3 E's, but it takes not only our organization to help keep our roadways safe, but also the driver. So the driver has to maintain their vehicle in good working order and maintain a safe, reasonable speed on the roadway. So it's not only the road commission working through our education to the public, the engineering, and then working with our law enforcement, it's also the driver itself. You can go to the next slide. So our core responsibilities, we maintain the traffic signs and signals, pavement markings, guardrail. We work with contractors to help maintain our guardrail. We inventory our guardrail, and then we also receive and respond to citizen requests. We get a lot of requests for different signage or different ideas or ways to improve our roadways. And a lot of times residents who drive their specific road every day may have great ideas. And so we try to listen to those and try to manage different improvements or things that can benefit the road commission or benefit the safety of the roadway. You can go to the next slide. So we also perform a lot of studies of our roadways. So we'll get a request in, and sometimes that request can take quite a long time because we may need to perform some type of review, either that's a speed limit review or perform some other study like a warrant analysis of a multi-way stop or a traffic signal, or whether a flashing beacon should go there, or some type of curve warning, or advisory speed should happen on at a curve. And a lot of times that happens through our count program, where we can evaluate those that data through our count program, because we collect speed, classification of vehicle, whether it's a truck or a truck and a trailer or a passenger vehicle, and then we evaluate crashes. So we have a link into the Michigan State Police website or their database, so we're able to review intersections or segments of road to determine how to make things safer. You can go to the next slide. So we also look to improve our roadways through project funding. So we prepare grants for safety grants and then for congestion mitigation to help improve our roads. And we also do that through our traffic management program, which we talked about last working session. So that's another way that we help to improve our neighborhoods and improve that quality of life. So that now we'll go into some interesting facts about our roadways. You can go to the next slide. So we have approximately 30,000 signs that we maintain on our roadways, and of those signs, about 6,000 of those are road name signs. And then of that, we also have 3,600 stop signs that we maintain. Those are emergency call-ins. So if we get a stop sign down, we call a crew in. And so, these past few days, especially during the winter, sometimes we're in a lot. But those are some interesting facts about our signs. And then our signals. You can go to the next slide. We have about 177 signals of our own of Washtenaw County Road Commission jurisdiction sign or signals. Of those are just devices. Of those, we have 104 traffic signals. And then we've started to, gosh, probably 4 years ago, install battery backup. So we have 50 locations where we have battery backup. That will allow that signal, if we lose power, to run for, depending on the size of the intersection, 6 to 8 hours. So which is typically what we see for just a minor outage. And so it's really improved. And another benefit that we have for these battery backups, we have a lot of equipment within our traffic signal cabinets, helps protect that equipment. So if we have any spike in energy in that cabinet, or if it goes to kind of a brownout, it helps manage that. So it really helps protect our equipment. We also have 54 flashing beacons out there and 19 RRFBs, which are rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So these are just from the WCRC owned devices. We also maintain 75 MDOT devices, 62 signals, 10 flashing beacons, and they have Hawk signals, which are the pedestrian hybrid, which are kind of a different type of signal for a crosswalk. You can go to the next slide. We also maintain 10.4 million feet of long line pavement marking, which is a huge amount. So we have a large budget that we maintain through a routine maintenance. We also manage the contract for our chip seal. So now that we've moved into some more asset management of performing chip seals, 100 miles of chip seal, well, we got to put paint down on that. And so that's a big program for us. We also have over 17,000 feet of stop bar and over 31,000 feet of crosswalk marking out there that we maintain. You can go to the next slide. Just in the past 10 years, we've installed 158 speed humps. Most of those most recently go into concrete for that material. But that's a big program, and we also maintain markings on those. You can go to the next slide. Then we have our traffic count program. We average about 260 counts per year. The pandemic kind of made those numbers fluctuate. So you can see kind of a dip there in 2020, and then we tried to catch up in 2021. So we maintain about 260 standard counts. Those are for our bridges. We count those. We have segments of road. And then we actually have to send those in to SEMCOG, and that helps determine, they keep a database as well. And we have our high priority roadways, which help determine federal aid for our system. Then we also get special counts. So those are our traffic calming locations, or where we request, hey, we need to look at a speed limit on this road. So we also perform those annually. You can go to the next slide. So just in the past 5 years, the TNS team, we've brought in more than $11 million to this organization through our grant programs. So we have our highway safety, which is our safety grant. That's $3.7 million that has come into this road commission. And there's also a program, high risk railroads, that has brought in $2 million. And then our congestion mitigation, air quality grants, which mainly cover our intersections, our signals. We've also put in right turn lanes with that, with those funds. We're actually looking at potentially some future roundabouts with those funds. That's brought in $6.5 million in just the last 5 years. So now we'll kind of go into, you can go to the next slide. We'll kind of go into some policies that has been adopted by this board. We mainly utilize it's called the MMUTCD, which is the Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's our main reference, and that's what we use for our standard. and we follow this manual very closely. There are times that, signage within this document, we need to use engineering judgment. But we've also developed some policies to help guide us through some of these devices that we want to put on our roadways, or different areas that this board has wanted to focus on. You can go to the next slide. So we'll kind of go through, and then I'll dive into a little deeper on each one of these. Neighborhood watch signs is a policy that has been adopted. Y intersections, and I'll answer that question on, well, what is a Y intersection? Our deaf blind child sign, warning signs, our neighborhood traffic management program, which we described a couple weeks ago. You can go to the next slide. Natural beauty road designation. We have a road naming policy, and then dynamic speed display signs. Those are the main policies that have been adopted. So the first one, you can go to the next slide. Neighborhood watch signs. This just allows placement of these signs on our local roads. We've worked with the Sheriff's Department in the past. Community will call and say, hey, we have a neighborhood watch group. We'd like to have these signs placed within our neighborhood, and we allow those. And so we'll coordinate with the Sheriff's Department or the local police department on where those should be placed, and whether it should be on their own sign or they can attach to one of our signs. You can go to the next one. Y intersections. So this is just a policy that has been adopted, giving direction to staff to look at these intersections when time and funding permits. So when time and funding are available. So as you see in the picture, that is a Y intersection. So these probably developed back in times when it was horse and carriage, where they would have most convenient to get through the intersection was to have this sweeping curve through the intersection. Well, these can be, we have still quite a few out there, but we've looked at these because they could be an unsafe intersection because it doesn't come in at a 90-degree angle. So we would look at these intersections and put it together a design. We've reconstructed these with our own crews. We've had safety grant applications where we've improved these. So it's a good program, but again, it's depending on when that time and funding is available. You can go to the next slide. Deaf blind child. So when I first started the road commission, it was just deaf child, and we still only installed the deaf child sign, but we've now incorporated that to include the blind child. So whenever we look at signage that goes on our roadways, we want to make sure that the driver understands. And so, and that can be, if there's a deaf child out there, they may be sporadic in how they're within the neighborhood. And so we feel that it really gives a clear message to that driver. So as we got the requests in for blind child, we started to look at, we should incorporate that. So we did revise this policy to include looking at cases whenever there would be a blind child within a neighborhood or an area segment of road that we could put these signs. So the policy mainly gives us direction on how to handle these. So we ask for doctor's notes and age of the child, and then we keep those on our records, and we maintain this sign. We install this at our cost, and we manage to maintain this until that child turns 18 years old. Yes.
So have the signs changed to say deaf and blind, or just?
No, we just put deaf child out there, and we explain that to some of those that may have a blind child. We want that clear direction. We want consistency, even though their child may not be deaf. We just install that sign, whether they're deaf or blind, because we feel it gives clear direction. We did a big research on this subject. We reached out to a lot of different road commissions, even different counties outside the state, on what they do. And at that time, they all mainly just installed the deaf child sign. And because of that, it just gave that clear direction, and the driver then could react to that sign. Where blind child, yeah, they would know how to react in some aspect. We just felt that the deaf child gave a clear direction. And as I'm thinking about that, I think I'd have to check with Julie, but we may have some blind child out there. But for the most part, we haven't just installed the deaf child. You can go to the next slide. Our neighborhood traffic management program. This allows staff to look at our local subdivision roads, which we did a big presentation this last working session. And this is a great program for our communities. And we have several communities that, like you saw on the slide earlier, where we've installed these. You can go to the next slide. Natural Beauty Road. So this is where a community can petition the road commission to designate a roadway a natural beauty. And there's certain criteria, certain time limits that we would need to follow. And so we have 11 locations throughout the county, 11 segments of roadway that have a natural beauty designation. So our policy mainly follows the Department of Natural Resources document, the state's law on natural beauty roads, but it helps guide us on how those procedures work for designating a roadway natural beauty.
Brent,
Yes.
as it relates to the natural beauty road, beyond the designation, are there any special benefits of being designated a natural beauty road?
There are not any, other than being recognized and on a state register as natural beauty. It really, there isn't much benefit. They do get signs that state that they are a natural beauty road, but we still perform normal maintenance as far as mowing and tree trimming to make sure that you have the safety of that edge of that road. So there's not any reduced speed or anything for those type of designations.
Thank
You can go to the next slide. So we have our road naming policy as well. This helps give direction to us on whenever we get a request to rename a road, what criteria they need to follow. Whenever we do get, we do have the ability through the policy that if we get an applicant that wants to rename a roadway, it would come at their cost. We don't take we take these very serious because it can affect a lot of people to change a roadway, a road name. And so we don't take these lightly. But this policy covers that, that direction on how to rename a road. We have had instances, and our policy also allows the board that if they do see benefit, safety benefit to rename a road, that we do have that ability, and then we would do that at no cost to the person requesting to rename a road. We have had locations that we've renamed in the past. Whitaker Road is an example. We've changed that to Huron Road. And then there's some other roadways within subdivisions that have gotten some name changes. Yes, Gloria.
So I had two questions kind of popped in my mind. Was how difficult is it to find the policy? The policy is open to the public if they decide or want to. And so what would constitute a safety reason to change the name of a sign?
So there may be instances where a certain road, and we've had that case, and I was just talking to Cheryl about it, where you may have the same address on a north and south. Whenever we name a roadway, we don't name it north or south, like North Zeeb or South Zeeb, but you could have a similar address on North Zeeb versus South Zeeb. And so there may be cases that, or another one's Harris Road. So we have a Harris Road down in Saline area, and then we have a Harris Road in Ipsy. And so whenever you're talking to emergency services and you're saying, I live on Harris Road, well, which Harris Road do you live on and where is that at? I think the technology has improved these days for emergency services, but those would be cases that we would look at. If we get a case where somebody would like to rename a road, we would look at, well, is there a safety benefit for that? And those are those cases. As far as having a policy available, you can certainly call the road commission to make that available. I don't believe we have it on our website.
Okay, so I have to say another wondering about, only because when I moved to this area, it was confusing to travel a road and it changed names 3 times, but it would be the same road,
Yeah,
or know that there were 3 Huron,
yeah.
River,
Here Drive, yeah, yeah.
Huron, Hogback, that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
that confusion, or is that because small areas or like Pittsfield Township and Arbor Ypsilanti are kind of merging into one?
Yeah, so there's examples. Here in River Drive is one where it does change names. So if you look through history, that here in River Drive, before the hospital was here, used to have a different alignment. And so those names just kind of stayed, even though they may just go through now just a parallel or a T intersection and it changes names. It's just over time, it's just due to history, the reason why we have some of the road names the way we do. We actually have a road name committee within our organization. It's myself, our surveyor, John Miles, our GIS, Alan Squire, and Julie Nixon. So whenever we get a request, and we have a lot of locations, a lot of times it's regarding the suffix, the prefix. And so we'll review those and we'll review our records, review our certification maps. And it kind of goes in waves on when we get these requests, but there are times when we have quite a few that we need to evaluate, and we'll sit down and look at these. But yes.
Question, how does Google know that you changed something?
They don't. We put in sometimes.
And I use that universally, right? For
Right.
online mapping systems.
Right, yeah, it doesn't, we have our certification maps. Sometimes we've made corrections to Google or to Apple, yeah, to make that change. But, we're guilty of it ourselves in some aspects, and I know for the committee, it's a big deal on trying to get our board resolutions have the same road name, make sure our certification maps have the same road name, make sure whenever we reference anything to the public, it has the same road name. And so it's a big issue that, we try to work hard at. So it's not just Google, it's even ourselves that we try to, the county GIS may have a different road name than so we try to work with everybody to make sure it's that we're consistent with that name. So, yeah.
So Brent, is the state ultimately framework? I mean, are we
Yeah.
trying to?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we do submit road names to, there's a statewide GIS framework. That process does take a long time to update, but we do submit those road name changes to them. Or if they have it incorrect, we try to correct them. But again, that process can take time. But yes, thank you, Cheryl. There is framework. We use that through RoadSoft, and Alan Squire, he submits those, and over time they do get corrected.
Hey, Brent, just a point of clarification. All these policies are on our website under the policies and procedures part at the bottom of the page, also on the traffic and safety part of our website, traffic and road safety.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So we also have a policy on the dynamic speed display signs. These are the signs that you see underneath the speed limit sign in most cases. Most time you see them in a neighborhood. This policy just helps manage these. We don't own or install these signs. A lot of times communities do, townships, sheriff's department. This just helps us manage that. And the main point within the policy is over time that sign, people get used to that sign and it'll become not as effective. It's a very useful tool, but we limit it to 30 days in a location, and then we want to see it rotated. So this policy helps us, and procedure helps us manage that with those local townships or the sheriff's department. Commissioner Almus, it looked like you had or Rod, go ahead.
With respect to your ADA transition plan,
Oh,
what is our responsibility to be sure we're in compliance with the ADA?
yeah, so we also have a policy for our ADA transition plan that covers our roadways and our facilities. So I'm the officer for the ADA transition plan. So if there's an individual with disabilities that doesn't feel that our facilities are set up properly, there's a form that they can send in to request that. We also have a program where we look at our non-motorized locations throughout the county to improve those and even our facilities. We actually have a program this summer where we're going to look at some of our front parking lot to improve some of that walkway. I don't know if that answers your question.
So we're required to provide ramps and driveways access?
Yeah,
for
so
wheelchairs?
sometimes it can be gray because a lot of those facilities are township facilities or local facilities. But whenever we have a project, it's a paving type project, then we're required based on that funding. And actually we even do that through our millage type projects where we'll replace those ramps that come across our roadway. So we're not replacing the full facility, the sidewalk down the road, but it would be the ramp and maybe a few feet to make sure that it complies with the standards for those ramp standards and to meet ADA.
If for some reason we're not in compliance, what's the sanction?
So whenever we have a project, we'll go out and review those ramps and then provide replacement for those. If there's a location that, we're not aware of, we don't go out and we seek, we're reviewing all of our roads on an annual basis. We mainly do that through our projects where we're replacing those ramps. We've replaced a lot of ramps over the years. And then we also have a non-motorized fund where we do look at our signalized intersections where we improve the countdown and the pedestrian signals and the ramps itself. But we have had locations where we've had a resident call. Zeeb Road is Zeeb and Jackson is a perfect example. We had someone with a low vision disability that struggled to get across the roadway. And we looked at through our non-motorized program, we improved that intersection, not only that intersection, several intersections along the Jackson Road corridor.
So, are we required, so I'm taking it that we're not required by law to go and do an evaluation and replace. But as we do those, is it the same as roadways that we're responsible, the responsibility of those go along with the same responsibilities as what our roadways are? And I guess what I'm asking, so the city is responsible for the city roads, the township for their township roads, and we for the countywide roads. Is it the same?
The responsibility for the ramp itself?
Yeah, what we have been told is our responsibility is to provide access to the roadway. So that's when Brent was saying we're not responsible for township, mostly it's township facilities, township sidewalks that would be within our road right of way. We're not responsible whether those are 2% or whether they're kittywampus or traversable and all those things. The main line of the sidewalk would not be our responsibility. Where our role comes into play is to allow someone access to the roadway. So it's primarily the ramps and any of that transition area from the sidewalk or whatever the facility is to the ramp to the roadway. So that's normally where those lines are. They can be a little blurred at times, but for the most part, that's what our responsibility is.
Right, so I understand that portion. I guess the portion that I'm wondering about. So all the roads, if the township or the city or someone else asks us of that, because I know that we help, right? They contract us kind of all over. I mean,
So city roads, we would have nothing to do with. Those are going to be under those will be a city's responsibility.
okay,
If a township comes in, we're working very hard with townships right now on the local road program. So certainly any work that would be done under the local road program, even if it's township funded, we would still have that same responsibility obligation under ADA to provide that appropriate transition area.
okay,
And our plan really is that because we are, I mean, there is a fiscal limitation to our organization. If we were to go and truly do an inventory of every single ramp in Washtenaw County and bring every single ramp up to standard and then keep it up to standard, because keep in mind, things do move.
right.
I mean, that would be a huge
Astronomical.
financial cost to this organization and a huge ongoing financial cost. So one of the important parts of having that transition plan in place is that we are committed whenever we are doing work in the area, again, even if it's not all our funding, in fact, it may apply if it's under permit as well, that those facilities that are being constructed then would meet ADA, and we are allowed to have that progressive as we are working in the area. It's not like a notice of a defect where as soon as we're put on notice, we have to run right out and fix that ramp. We are allowed to say, we'll schedule that work when we are doing work in the area and coordinate with other activities.
Okay,
Now, as an organization, like Brent said, we actually have a non-motorized plan in place. And so there's times when we are setting up specific projects, like what he described at Zeed and Jackson. So again, as funding is available, we are trying to be slightly proactive, but in the grand scheme of things, it is only one step forward.
thank you.
So in a situation where someone who has a disability is in a motorized wheelchair, and for some reason that motorized wheelchair is difficult to navigate an intersection, would they contact the road commission and say, hey, can you look at this situation and
Yes.
help me out?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they would contact us, we would put a request in, we would evaluate that intersection and determine if it qualified for our program or when we could fund that improvement.
And I'm assuming as well that the standard is high as it relates to someone suing us for non-compliance.
Can we be sued for non-compliance?
Well, anybody can sue anybody at
No, we
any
can.
given
Right.
day. I mean, then we have defenses at that point. Anybody can sue anybody. But as we are doing work, it is a defendable position to look to our transition plan and just say, we will schedule that work as we are in the area. And like Brent said, it's a good communication tool. It gives us an opportunity to speak to that resident to say, oh, we have work coming at this time, or maybe we don't. And maybe as we're looking forward and we realize that we have a budget for non-motorized, maybe we'll make that a priority because now we have had an actual request in that area. But we don't have an obligation to have to go out and immediately address it simply because we've been put on notice that there may be somebody with a disability utilizing that area.
Thank you.
Brent, I have a question.
Yeah.
The community's request to have the dynamic speed display sign, and what is the cost of that?
The cost of one sign is about $2,500. But again, we don't have any, we have not purchased any at the road commission. Those are all done through the township. But that's just the cost of the device. I mean, now you got to look at the support to hold it up and the additional signs and the labor to install it. So that's approximately the cost. I wouldn't say I mean, it probably depends on the vendor, but that's about what you would look at.
Okay, so if a community wanted a sign, they would contact the road commission and their township?
So they would work through their township, and then we would work with them on the appropriate location and what it means within our policy on how long it can be there and what other some options are. So we do have some communities within Pittsfield Township that they have their own program. They've installed multiple signs within the neighborhood, and then they rotate it on, some type of schedule.
I was gonna say, because they get used to the sign, right?
Right.
So rotating it is one way to
Correct.
refresh it or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very effective sign, but only for a period of time.
Right,
And then,
right.
then you get kids that want to play with the sign, they want to see how fast they're driving, or people then start to ignore it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So now we'll go into some of the procedures that we follow. You can go to the next slide. So just a few procedures that we've written down. We do have a lot of different other procedures that we follow, and I brought it up earlier on the MMUTCD, Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That gives some guidance, but it doesn't, sometimes that guidance doesn't give us specifics on how to apply, when to put up a flashing beacon, for instance. So we have to use engineering judgment on some of that, and sometimes we kind of put together our own little procedure to be consistent and to then report that to the public that this is how we handle these signs. And a lot of times those are consistent with what other organizations do. But these are some that we have. We have deer crossing sign procedure for that. Our left turn phasing at traffic signals, advanced road name signs when we put those in, and then our intersection sight distance. Before you move on, Emily, we also have where we look at school signage assemblies, where we have decided that we'll put there's a post strip, like a sign. So we do that at all of those advanced warning signs for any type of school. Our pedestrian or school crossing signs, we change the color. We make sure that they're fluorescent yellow, lime green. Our township signs, those come at the request of the township and at their cost. Park signs are the same way. So we do install park signs, but those come at the request of the park and at their cost. We also have to follow retroreflectivity. So that's within that Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So there's a time frame that those signs, the reflectiveness of that sign will degrade over time. And so we change that based on our inventory. We do kind of a bulk replacement of a roadway. And we do that based on the manufacturer's warranty of that sign. School zones, the Michigan Vehicle Code has changed whenever a school zone can be established, and mainly that's based on if there's walkers present or not. And so we have evaluated those, and we'll put those up, and we work with the schools on whether or not walkers are present and what route they're taking and how we can cover those school zones.
Brett, is this the procedures on the website also?
No, I don't, maybe the deer crossing one, I don't know if yeah, these are mainly documents that guide staff and our maintenance crews on maintaining and evaluating whether or not these signs, I mean, we also look at tractor crossing signs. So we have several of those on our roadways, and so it helps guide us on when those should be installed. So no, I don't believe they're on our website.
So it would be the same thing for bus routes also, children walking to a bus route.
Yeah, so a superintendent can request school signage based on that route, and if there's a crossing, we can then establish that school cross and make that a designated school crossing and signage for that crossing, but those come through the request of the superintendent or the manager for that school.
Well, as large as Washtenaw County is, a lot of the bus routes are in townships, right? And they've changed policies where buses used to pick children up right in front of their homes, and now they've changed policies where they have to walk down a
Mhm.
road to catch a bus, and those roads are like 45 miles an hour sometimes, and no sidewalks. So a request would be sent through the superintendent to say,
Yeah, we would work with them on what potentially could be utilized out there. We have not gotten that request recently. We have gotten requests. There's like a school bus stop, like a site distance, and that's based on the site of the flashing beacons on the school bus. And so we work with the school transportation departments on when those signs will apply. So we would work with whatever transportation department to determine if there's additional signage. And one thing we want to make sure is it's effective. We don't want to put a sign out there that somebody's going to ignore. Good example, one thing that they've taken out of, and I know that we get a lot of requests on our hidden driveway type signs. Well, that's not an approved type sign, and that's a sign that's typically ignored. And so we don't want to have those type of signs on our roadway that are ignored. So we would work with the transportation department on if there's additional sign needed and what that would look like.
Grant, might the Road Commission be responsible or liable if a sign were not employed? Like if a child were to get injured at a school intersection and someone might argue there should be a sign there.
I'm not an attorney, but we evaluate our roads and we do a great job at it, but if we're not aware of a situation, and we don't feel it may be effective, I don't know what our liability would be,
Yeah, I think that really gets to underscoring the importance of consistency in the decision-making, following the MMUTCD, the policies and procedures that we have in place. Again, so heaven forbid that type of a situation should arise, but if we are consistent in our decision-making and it is founded in law, Michigan Vehicle Code, good engineering judgment, and we're very consistent on how we're doing that, we're at least in a defendable position at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. No, thank you.
Also, just a reminder that driver safety is part of the driver as well.
Yeah.
More on
Absolutely.
the roadway,
Right.
all the speed limit laws, pedestrian laws, and sign that is out there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So you can go to the next slide. So we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of these. So our deer crossing signs. So we have a procedure that we've put in place. So these would be warranted if there are 5 deer-related crashes within a 12-month period. So we look closely at our crash records through the Michigan State Police on whether or not one of these would be warranted. And we've done that to be consistent. We get a lot of these requests, so we want to have some criteria to evaluate those. So we look at that not only when we have a program that we're replacing the signs along a corridor, we'll review this procedure, but also if we get a request from a resident, we'll look at those.
so Brent, so that once put up, it doesn't necessarily stay up there. So the criteria is 5 crashes in a 12-month period.
Correct.
Okay.
Go to the next slide. So we've developed a procedure for determining for left turn protection. So that would be the flashing yellow. So we have a lot of locations where we have the flashing yellow. We look at, it's called the cross product. That's when you have a left turning volume multiplied by your opposing volume, and then it has to reach a certain number, and then that then determines what level of protection we put out there, whether that's a protected only type left turn signal, or we can allow the flashing yellow. So we've developed a process. We look at crash history for an intersection, and then we can evaluate that over time. And give you an example, we've had one location that we've installed flashing yellow, and we were having some crashes. And we had the feeling that it was due to some other reasons. You know, and we get a lot of knee-jerk request on you put this left turn, this they call it permissive, that left turn flashing yellow. But as we started to look closer at the crashes and what was happening, and some of it was, and that was one thing that this board approved, was no right turn on red at the Carpenter and Packard intersection. And then that has really helped reduce and eliminate some of those crash concerns. So this procedure kind of helps us evaluate where these locations and what type of left turn protection we should put on there.
I'm just wondering, Brent, what percentage of our traffic signals would you describe as smart signals?
A percentage, we're probably right around 80% of our signals are a smart signal. So we have about 85, I think, signals that we can communicate with second by second.
Thank you.
Brent, is there a reason for the 2 yellows? Is that 2 lanes or?
Yeah, so one's flashing and one's solid. So if you were to show up at one of these intersections, it would go green, or it would start out red, and then it would go to that flashing yellow. And then if there were still vehicles present, it would go green arrow. And then whenever it terminated to go to the other side street, it would go solid yellow, which is the one underneath the red, and then the solid red arrow. So advanced road name signs. So we've developed kind of our own procedure on when and where to put these. There's a couple different examples, pictures there. One being the green and white advanced sign, and then and we only have a few of those out there. Majority of the time we put the warning type sign underneath the stop ahead or yield ahead, or intersection sign ahead type sign, where we'd put our advanced road name. We look at any primary to primary type roadway, primary to local, depending on the speed. We'll install advanced road name, and then we look at whether or not we have illuminated signs for an intersection on determining whether or not we put the advanced road name sign up. So it just helps us be consistent and know where and when to have these installed. And then you can go to the next slide. Then lastly, we also get a lot of requests for intersection sight distance. So we have criteria that we have put together. It mainly follows AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. And those guidelines that help us, based on the speed of the roadway, determine what that sight distance should be. This procedure helps us determine what's the proper channel for review, and then who provides response, and then if there is any action for any type of modification on where that goes. So and then this is consistent with our permit section. They also perform site distance reviews for any type of new driveways. And so it's consistent with their procedure too. That's it.
have a question, Brett.
Yes,
The do not litter signs.
yeah.
So a community requesting a do not litter sign, is there a policy here? Is that one of the procedures or?
Yeah, we do not have a policy or procedure for that sign. We have worked with communities to install that sign. What we have we've tried to spin it. So I know we've had some communities that want the no littering and, but we've tried to spin it to more of a positive message on, hey, keep our roadways clean. And so, and we've provided examples. I mean, we've had some of those no littering signs put out, mainly in Ypsilanti Township, but we've really encouraged that to be more of a positive message than more of a directive.
So Brett, on that line, it used to be, there was a fine, I don't know if that's true or not, for the state for littering, and I used to see signs like that. So is that on the same?
Yeah, so yeah, it's still, I'm sorry, is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. It's still a law to not be able to litter, and you don't need a sign to instruct the public with that. So we typically don't install those. A lot of times, we say it's like an advertisement where it kind of advertises where people can litter and a lot of times we get requests, and when I bring up no dumping. No dumping is another procedure that we have. Those are township paid for. But again, we really try to look at those locations and we try to spin the message, because what we don't want is to put a sign up and then have the situation get worse. Which is sometimes what we found with those no dumping, and what we don't want is if we start installing these no littering, a similar situation, especially when you don't need the sign there to help regulate that.
You probably mentioned it before, but as it relates to signals, what is an RRFB signal?
It's a rectangular rapid flashing beacon.
Oh, okay, for
Yeah, it's like a rectangle, and it's like the crosswalks, and it flashes real fast.
pedestrian traffic.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Brent? No, thank you.
Very good
Very
presentation.
Yeah, thank
Very
you.
good.
Much, Brent.
Again, that was sort of a fast and furious trip through traffic and safety. So if there are other areas that you would really prefer to do a deep dive, let myself, let Matt, let Brent know. I'm happy to come back, happy to volunteer Brent to come back and his staff to talk about in depth. As Brent indicated, that section in particular deals a lot with the public. It is a very public facing part of our organization. Unfortunately, they also say no a lot. But one of the things we do like to do is also explain and educate what we can do, and unfortunately what we can't do. And as Brent said, if there's more positive ways of doing things or encouraging people, we're certainly, trying to work very closely with communities on that. We work very closely with our townships on a lot of the traffic and safety endeavors as well. So please let me know if there's more that you'd like to hear about.
Thank you.
I believe next up on our agenda is a brief break, and then we do have Mike Cluck that will be joining us to give us an update on where we are with our labor negotiations with our TPOAM bargaining unit. We do need to go into a closed session for that. So I'm not sure, do you want to take a break first, Barb, then come back, go into closed session here? One thing that we are discovering with all this wonderful technology that we have is that not only can you hear us here, you can also hear us outside this room. So we're going to move the closed session. Once we go into closed session, we will physically go upstairs into room 200, where we
Okay.
can have a little more privacy with respect to this dialogue. So does that make sense?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Let's take a break, come back here promptly at what, 10 after you've got? 15 after. So 10-minute break, come back here. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session,
at which point we will march ourselves upstairs.
Great.
Okay, thank
And I
you.
assume we can leave our belongings and materials here safely in the interim? Okay. So we will recess for 10 minutes
minutes.
and then come back here at 10:15.
Yes.
All right, we are back. It is 10:16. At this time, I entertain a motion to begin our scheduled closed session under Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act to receive an update on the TPOAM contract negotiations.
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Aaron, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Douglas Fuller,
Aye.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas,
Yes.
Commissioner Joanne McCullum,
Yes.
Commissioner Rod Green,
Aye.
and Commissioner Barb Fuller.
Yes, we are now in closed session. Emily, would you like to describe how this works, please?
Yes, please. Thank you. So for virtual participants, if you're not a road commissioner or a designated staff member, I will now move you to the virtual waiting room. If you would like to be returned to the open session of the meeting once we've completed the closed session, please remain in that virtual waiting room. I will readmit you once the closed session has been completed.
The next item on our agenda is the Special Assessment District Overview. Cheryl, if you would, please.
Brief introduction. Aaron Burkholz. Agenda for this. Of determination, and we realize. We thought, wow, okay, not only is it new for many of our staff, it's also new for the majority of our boards. So we thought it would be helpful to take a step back just to go through what that special assessment district process is to help educate the board and what your role in that process is. So Aaron and Michelle are here to provide an overview and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And for the record, if you'd introduce yourself, so it's part of the recording.
Certainly. So Aaron Burkholz, Senior Project Manager with the Washtenaw County Road Commission, and Michelle Ford, one of our engineers who works with me in the design and construction section, is here as well. We very much appreciate the board's time this morning, allowing us to provide some background on the SAD process. As Cheryl mentioned, it's been quite some time since the Road Commission last went through this process. That was for the Lone Oak subdivision in Lodi Township back in 2016. So again, it's not a, in our experience as an agency, it's not an often used type of means of investing in subdivision roads. But certainly with the petitions that we received from the York Timber Ridge subdivision in York Township, it prompted us to have to revisit the means by which the Road Commission administers one of these SADs. So thank you, Emily, for sharing the presentation that Michelle and I prepared for today. So if we could go ahead and move on to the next slide. So again, the agenda for this morning, both Michelle and I will be providing the presentation. So an overview of the SAD process, a review of the project at hand, again, that being the York Timber Ridge subdivision. We will talk about the hearing of objections that was held. That was a public hearing held on March 2nd here at the Road Commission. That was offered in a hybrid format. So both in person here in the boardroom and virtually via Zoom. We'll talk about the final order of determination, and Cheryl mentioned that. That will be an action item that's taken up by the board for consideration this afternoon at the board meeting. And then the next steps that are involved in the SAD process. Next slide, Emily. So again, I previously introduced myself and I've introduced Michelle, so we can move on to the next slide. So a special assessment district, by definition, a designated area where a majority of the property owners agree to allow a government agency to levy a special property tax in exchange for a specific service such as the improvement of public roads. Next slide. So what does that mean? It is a property tax on a specific group for a specific improvement. And again, in the case of the York Timber Ridge subdivision, we did receive petitions from that community prompting the road commission to follow the Public Act 246 process. So once we received those petitions and validated those, the road commission is legally bound to follow that Public Act 246 process. We can't simply say, oh, no, we're not interested, or no SADs, the idea of that makes us uncomfortable. We have to follow through on that Public Act 246. Next slide. So certainly it's not lost on any of us. I don't think that there are many subdivision roads that are in need of repair. Certainly the roads within the York Timber Ridge subdivision fall into that category. They are in need of repair. The roads are approximately 20 years old and they are showing their age. So at this point, there is need for work. And unfortunately, there is not enough funding to go around. Only local funds, so that would be road commission or township funds, can be used on subdivision roads. They are not federal aid eligible roads. And the county road millage is not designated for subdivision streets. So we are very limited when it comes to funding that can be used for the purposes of improving subdivision roads that are under the jurisdiction of the road commission. Next slide. So there are two SAD special assessment district options that can be considered by communities. The first one there is a township administered SAD that is governed by Public Act 188 of 1954. Under that act, it does provide townships with additional flexibility beyond that would be afforded to a road commission under Public Act 246. For instance, township administered SADs could prompt infrastructure improvements such as utilities like water mains or sanitary sewers that may be under the jurisdiction of the township. But again, in the case of the York Timber Ridge subdivision, they submitted their petitions to the road commission under Public Act 246 of 1931, and that's what brings us here today. Next slide. So as I mentioned a couple times previously, the petitions were submitted to the road commission. Those petitions reflected 63% of the parcel owners agreeing to pursue an SAD for the purposes of improving their streets in their community. So again, that was 63% of the parcel owners. That reflected approximately 55% of the lineal frontage. So lineal frontage would be basically a given property's frontage along one of the roads to be improved. So what you can imagine is in this subdivision, a corner lot has a lot of lineal frontage. They are bordering streets on two sides. The cul-de-sac properties, because of their shape, do not have much lineal frontage. In some cases, it's very limited, like 35 feet, because they're more of a pie shape as they come into the cul-de-sac. So again, under the Public Act 246 requirements, the SAD process begins when the petitions signed and approved by the property owners reflect more than 50% of the lineal frontage. And in this case, we had 55%. So then the long process begins. Yes, Barb.
If I may, a question. How is the subdivision defined? As we both know, there's the Homeowners Association, right? And some
Correct.
people are members of that, some are not.
Correct.
How is that determined?
Yeah, so the Homeowners Association does not include all of the properties that are included in the special assessment district boundary. The special assessment district boundary is defined by those properties that are receiving benefit from the proposed road improvements. So some of the properties, those properties that lie along the north side of this subdivision, those properties existed prior to the construction of the subdivision. And those properties still have Judd Road addresses. But again, for the purposes of defining the special assessment district boundary, we look at the properties that would receive benefit from the road improvements that are being proposed.
Okay, so could you please, because I'm trying to understand this. So when the petition is signed by 50% of the homeowners who are going to receive the benefit, or all of the homeowners of the area?
So the way it's defined in the act is it has to, again, be in total, it has to be greater than 50% of the lineal frontage. So you can imagine for a property owner that's on a corner lot, it counts more, if you will, because they have property that's bounded on two sides along the roads that potentially are going to be improved. And then what we do, and York Township assisted us in this, is we review, it has to be all of the property owners that are named. So for instance, if it's a couple that owns the property, both have to sign the petition. You can't have just one. The other thing is the township reviewed and verified that all those who had signed the petition were current with their property taxes. So if there's any property that's in delinquency, their vote more or less can't count. So again, York Township assisted us with that and did verify that the property owners that signed were all of the property owners named on a given piece of property, and that they were not in delinquency as far as property taxes.
So Aaron, when you say a property owner is receiving benefit.
Yes.
How are you defining in this case benefit?
Sure. In this case, they would receive benefit if they use the roads proposed for improvement for ingress and egress from their home, basically, as we looked at, do they use these roads? Yep.
So talking about the Timber Ridge HOA
Yes.
is really kind of is rather misleading in terms of who's
Right.
receiving benefit from this SAD.
That's correct. It doesn't reflect all those. Looking at the homeowners association, it does not necessarily reflect all those that would receive benefit from the proposed road improvements.
And we're defining the SAD based on who receives benefit, not who is a member of the HOA or included in that.
That is correct.
Okay.
And certainly it's worth noting that those properties that are along Judd Road that pre-existed the subdivision, as the HOA took up the effort to circulate the petition to secure the signatures needed to start the SAD, it's our impression they did not talk to those property owners that were outside of the HOA. And that has been brought to our attention by those owners that still have Judd Road addresses, is that they were not contacted by the HOA. Our impression, again, based on what we've been told, is that they were first aware of the SAD when they received a letter from the road commission after the hearing of objections was set. So again, under the Public Act, when the board took the action to set a public hearing for the hearing of objections, we sent a letter to all of the property owners that were within the SAD boundary. And that's when those property owners along Judd Road first heard of this.
So were they included in the number that needed to exceed 50%?
We did count them.
You did,
yes.
okay.
So we counted them. And again, none of them had signed the petition, but we did count them in determining that it was more than 50% of the lineal frontage. Yes.
Thank you.
I
Matt?
can just add one thing. So when the petition comes in, it states what roads they want improved. And then staff reviews and says, all right, who has driveway access to those roads that will receive such a benefit? And that's how the district essentially is formed. And the evaluation of the petition is formed. And again, this law is great because it is very much forcing that engagement. It enforces, here's the rules on how to go about it. Here's how you evaluate it. You have to have a public hearing. So it requires public engagement. And then Aaron will go into further what the steps are. But I want to be very clear that, and we said this to the residents as well, we're not here to tell you you need to reconstruct your roads. We're acting in response to a petition we received saying we would like our roads reconstructed.
Okay.
So I think it's good if these are great questions. A lot of it we covered in reviewing the steps.
Okay.
Commissioner Green and Commissioner Yamas, do you have questions before Aaron
Just
continues?
one.
Okay,
So the tax assessment is only upon those who benefit from the improvement.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yamas?
I will wait for the rest of the representation. And
Okay,
the presentation, I will write my questions down.
okay.
Okay, next slide. So again, we'll walk through the SAD process. The first step is, as we referenced, the submittal of the petition, and we did receive the petitions meeting the requirements of Public Act 246. The board acknowledged the petition. So that was on August 17th of last year. The board instructed staff to review the validity of the petition. As I mentioned before, we worked with York Township to do so and found that the petitions submitted were valid. There's the initial determination of necessity. And so that occurred on October 5th of last year. In passing that resolution, the board was instructing staff to begin the design engineering to review the scope of the improvements needed for these roads within the SAD and to generate an estimate for the cost that would be associated with those improvements. The first order of determination was on February 1st of this year, and that included the setting of a date and time for the hearing of objections. And also I was identified as the hearing examiner for this process. And again, that is required by Public Act 246. The hearing of objections occurred on March 2nd. As I mentioned, that was provided in hybrid format. At that meeting, Michelle and I and Matt were in attendance. We provided the scope of the work that we are proposing be performed. We provided the estimated costs, and we talked about the payment that would be involved. And Michelle will get into that during her part of this presentation. She'll review the type of work that we're proposing to be done and the costs, the estimated costs that are associated with that. And also, and very importantly, owners are provided an opportunity to state their objections at that hearing of objections. And we did hear from owners at that meeting who were not in favor of the SAD. And I'll say in particular, not in favor of being included in the SAD. So next step. That brings us to today. So what staff have proposed to the board for this afternoon's meeting as an action item would be the final order of determination. Again, under the Public Act, that has to occur within 30 days of the hearing of objections. And so really there has to be action today on that item because the next regularly scheduled board meeting is on April 4th, if I recall correctly. And so that would be beyond the 30-day definition in the Public Act. And basically by taking that action, the board would be instructing staff to proceed with advertisement and bidding of the proposed project. So again, should the board take the action this afternoon to approve that, to pass that resolution, that final order of determination, those roads are going to be improved at that point. The only exception would be is that final order of determination triggers the opportunity for the residents to circulate. It's referred to as a petition of reconsideration. And so the residents have an opportunity at that point to circulate another petition calling for the board to pause the action. And that would require the board to set another public hearing date based on that new petition. And again, the petition has to reflect more than 50% of the lineal frontage of the properties that are within the special assessment district. Yes, Commissioner Green.
Thank you. Are parcel owners who are not personally impacted by the special assessment, are they allowed to object to the petition?
I don't know.
They would not be allowed to sign the petition because it has to be those who are.
The only ones allowed to sign that petition of reconsideration are those who are eligible in the first place to initiate the petition. So it has to be someone within the special assessment district meeting the requirements, all of the people within the deed, no back taxes, those kinds of things. Those are the only ones who can officially object.
Okay.
Commissioner Yamas, did you?
Yeah, just clarification. So only those that officially can initiate the first petition and had the opportunity to sign the petition, only those same people have the opportunity to sign an opposition to this. That'll be their last chance, even after our decision today.
Correct.
You know, that kind of was one of my questions.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the process that you just described.
Yes.
Okay.
Aaron, at what point should this board want to entertain the notion of excluding some of the folks who expressed their objection to being included? At what step in this whole process does the board consider that?
Sure, and that consideration would be further down in the process. It would be at the setting of the assessment roll. So we'll touch on that in just a moment. So we would have, again, assuming that the board would be supportive of that final order of determination today, we would move forward with the advertisement of the project for construction bids. All of the bidders have to be MDOT pre-qualified. We would have a bid opening, also referred to as a bid letting. We would review the bids and determine the lowest qualified bidder to perform the proposed work. And then we would have the assessment roll. So again, that would come at some point hereafter. The board would pass a resolution or would be proposed to pass a resolution to hold a public hearing to confirm the assessment roll. So again, that step 9 is just to set the date and the time and the location for the confirmation of the assessment roll. And then we would have the public hearing for the assessment roll. And at that point, the board will confirm or change the final assessment roll. I believe, Commissioner Fuller, that would be the point at which if the board elected to not include certain properties, that's the point at which that would be done. And it's not so much, I don't believe, that the properties would be excluded from the SAD. The properties would not be required to contribute to the SAD. Because again, the SAD boundary is defined as properties that are receiving a benefit by the proposed road improvements. The board could reach a decision at step 10 to say, yes, this property is receiving a benefit from the proposed road improvements. So they're going to remain in the SAD, but their contribution is being adjusted. So that can be considered at that point.
So I guess that's my, along through the chair, it is kind of my question and or clarification. So if somebody presents something to us during public comment or writes to us as they do, that states they will not benefit from this or their benefit is going to be minimal, that's at the point that we might consider it at step 10.
That is correct. Yes.
Does the township's poverty exemption policy influence whether or not people would be required to pay the assessment if they remained included?
I do not know. Matt, can you comment on that? No. No, I do not.
Okay.
Barb, could you rephrase that?
every township is required to adopt a poverty exemption policy, I believe, annually.
Poverty is the adjective I'd missed before.
Okay, got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next step. So again, following the public hearing for the assessment roll, there's the sales of bonds or notes to cover the administration, design, construction, and there's some contingency built into that estimate. So again, we've already incurred design costs, and Michelle will go into that in her part of the presentation when she talks about how we determine the scope of work. But Road Commission staff have spent time putting together the proposed scope of work, related specifications, and estimate. We've performed work in the field. Those type of costs have already been incurred by the Road Commission towards this special assessment district. Next step. And then finally, in step 12, we arrive at construction. And we would expect that construction could occur this construction season, that would occur during 2022. And again, we would need to work our way through the advertisement and bidding process and have a contract in place to perform the proposed improvements.
So I have a question.
Commissioner Fuller.
At the point where this board decided hypothetically that a particular property was either A, not the beneficiary of the proposed agreement, or it was assessed incorrectly. We've already done the preliminary engineering. We decided that the project is going to cost 377 shekels. So when we say this particular piece of property is being assessed too much, we're getting 2 shekels, okay? And we either reduce it to 0 or reduce it in half. The 377 shekels is still going to be spent.
That is correct.
So that means then automatically everybody else has to have theirs increased.
Someone else has to pay for that.
Right.
So yeah, so it would be, again, because your total estimated amount is not going to change. So if the contribution by any given property is reduced or set to 0, others
Whichever,
have to
yeah.
pay for that.
If I may,
Please.
there are a couple options. So you can assess based on the number of parcels. Can you put the exhibit where they have the number of the parcel numbers? There you go. So before you, you've got the boundary in red. Every parcel is numbered that has a driveway that goes out to a road that's being improved. So your options for assessing are either A, by parcel, which to me is the fairest in what we've done historically, because if you start doing by front footage, lot 34 will pay very little, and lot 51 will pay a whole lot. You can see it visually.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you start, so it's either parcel or front footage. That's the options. That's it. Or you say you're excluded from the assessment roll. There's no option to say you pay half. No, it's exclusion. So what would be is if any of those parcels highlighted 1, 2, 44 or 42 through 46, it's like an eye exam. So
How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right. I need a little adjustment, I think. So these are ones that are not in the homeowners, although that doesn't have any bearing on the SAD, but that's a lot of the discussion
Right.
previously was. They're the ones that are the non-HOA members. I look at it, you could certainly take it as petitions come forth saying, a request comes forth to be excluded from the SAD, it would be the board's either yay or nay, either grant that request or deny the request for each parcel that comes forward and says, I would like to be excluded. And that would be done prior to setting the assessment roll. So if you exclude those parcels, a good example, I think it's $11,000 per parcel right now. That doesn't include interest. If you start excluding all those folks that aren't in the HOA, or they come forward and say, you know, they give reasons, whether they're valid or not, that's for you to determine. It's going to go up significantly for those
Or
other
everybody
folks.
else is still in the
Right,
HOA.
right.
Or in the
For
assessment.
those other folks. I mean, it could be $1,000 to $2,000 more that other people are going to pay, and those parcels that are in blue absolutely receive a benefit. They're going to be driving on new roads. The other angle, you know, for consideration is when they were required to tie into the new roads. They certainly didn't pay for the new roads. The construction of the homes and the sale of those homes certainly paid for them at that time. They've used them for 20+ years now. And now it's time for that they be reconstructed. So now that they're going to be reconstructed, somebody's got to pay for them, but they're going to receive that benefit. And that's how we form the red boundary. So with that, I'll let Aaron get back to his presentation.
Commissioner
Matt, while
Green?
you're still there,
Sure, sir.
the ones in
Head on a
blue,
swivel.
I'm gonna, no, I don't have the number in front of me. There was a lady at the Wednesday
Chat session?
chat session,
Mhm.
who was representing, she said, her parents-in-law.
Yes,
And I'm guessing that that's what is numbered here, 45.
that's correct. So 45, the residents there, the last name is Kuhl, Cool.
Cool. okay.
And their daughter-in-law, Anna Stevens, had attended the chat, and then
Right.
she followed up with me, and we
Good,
talked.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I know she got your name, she was given your name and what have you, so.
Yes.
And I'm guessing by osmosis, by what you gentlemen have said this morning, that those blue numbered places were not originally notified by the HOA that they were spreading that or circulating that petition.
That's my understanding.
We don't circulate petitions.
Well, no, I
Right, but
understand. but I mean,
based on
that's
the-
what's being represented.
Based on the commentary we've received, that's our understanding, is that those properties that are shaded in blue did not receive the petition. They were first informed of the SAD when they received the letter from the road commission. And again, in regards to the numbered parcels there, we have heard from number 2. Their last name is Gaskell. We've heard from,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yep.
I didn't
on
see
the-
number 2. Now,
Yep,
okay,
number
I
2
got
on
it.
the west side
Yeah.
there. On the east side, that northeast corner, we've heard from number 43. Their name is Merx, MERX. We've heard from 42. The last name is James. And then we've heard from 45, and that's Cool. We have not heard from number 1, 44, or 46. And 46 is a little bit unclear on whether or not that's included in the HOA, because that is new construction. Looking back at the aerials, that house was not there in 2018, but is there now. So sometime in the last 3 years, that home was constructed.
Well, they would be within the HOA, would they not?
Again, I'm not sure, with it being new construction, I don't know like how the HOA boundary is
Right.
defined. So in that case, I don't know how involved they were in the circulation of that petition from the HOA.
I turned this off. I swear I did.
So there is an opportunity in the process, and we did this up off. Boy, in Northfield Township, we had a Public Act 246. In fact, at our last board meeting, we had that little court off that loop. And that loop had at one point petitioned for their roads.
Right.
And then they went through the process of circulating the second petition and withdrew themselves. Northfield Church Road is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that was Leland Acres, I believe, is
Yeah.
the development that was up there off
Right.
of Northfield Church and I believe Earhart Road,
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah.
That is an example of where we had the initial petition. There actually was disagreement amongst the property owners as to even the type of improvement, whether it was gonna
Right.
be a gravel improvement. That was a half gravel, half paved. They couldn't, anyways, we ended
No.
up with a petition for reconsideration that was successful and that
Right.
ended up just
And that stopped.
stopping the
Yeah.
entire project after it went through all the steps until,
There.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So in this particular case, just so I get it in my head correctly, there will be an opportunity for the people in blue or anywhere else for that matter, to come before this board when we set the roll and say, not me.
And the petition for reconsideration would occur after today's action item, after the final order of determination. They have 10 calendar days. starting
That
tomorrow.
second petition.
Yes, and so I have received inquiries from a couple of the residents, a couple of the property owners inquiring about that petition for reconsideration. But again, it would follow the same type of format as the original petition.
What's the right name for the petition for reconsideration?
Yes, petition for reconsideration.
Petition for reconsideration has 10 days. Is that 10 days in order for me to raise my hand and say, yes, we're going to start circulating that petition? Or is that 10 days to bring the petition to us?
10 days to bring the petition to us. And again, that would occur starting tomorrow, because the way that Public Act 246 reads, it's 10 days following the mailing of the final order of determination to the property owners. So
So if we
tomorrow,
act this today to approve this, then we will send letters to all the people in the district or proposed
Yes.
district.
that would be mailed out tomorrow.
Be mailed out
And
tomorrow.
tomorrow is when the 10-day.
So then they
countdown
have
will
9
start
more days to get this
to
petition
get a
organized
petition put
and get it
together.
back here.
Right.
And we did discuss this at the hearing of objections. So one of the things that was asked was, do they need to wait for this final order to begin circulating? And we answered them, no, they did not, because we specified that 10 days is not very long. And so I do believe he's already received inquiries about how to do it, that if that process has started, it has already started. Because they know their timeline. So, you know, they were instructed that they did not have to wait until they got that letter to start the proceedings for that.
it's just the deadline for submitting them
Right.
is 10 days after.
Right. So were any of the people in blue, people that were inquired?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So will they need 63% of the parcel owners for
They
the
would,
reconsideration objection?
Yeah, that petition for reconsideration would need to be valid. It would need to reflect greater than 50% of the lineal frontage within the proposed SAD. So it would be the same requirement as the original requirement that started this process.
And the road, the picture of the road looks pretty bad.
It
What's
is.
the measurement? Is it a pacer measurement?
These roads, we did not use a pacer rating measurement. When we received the petition and after the board passed the first order of determination, we went out and visually inspected the roads and did various types of evaluations to determine the best means to improve them.
Is there a reason why you didn't use the pacer measurement?
I don't,
I
Matt,
looked at it, they're poor.
They do look.
No, I mean, the Pacer rating is poor.
Oh, the page, okay, so it would be,
Yeah.
if I looked on the map, it would be red.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So it looks like, I'm sorry, Commissioner Green, did you have a question?
Just a real quick one, but I think you've answered it. As a practical matter, being a part of the the homeowners association is irrelevant.
for the purposes of the SAD, that is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yamas?
I think I'm writing down my question, so I
Okay.
think it may get answered through the rest of this.
Okay. My question is, I don't know what slide this was. York Timber Ridge SAD petition starts with petition submitted to us, signed by 63% of the parcel owners, which is approximately 5% of the linear frontage. Those are very different.
Yes, and that reflects basically the size of the frontage, the frontage length, if you will. And as I mentioned, for a corner lot to sign that petition, theirs carries more weight than a cul-de-sac lot because their frontage is so small. So that's why there's a difference. If we just simply count up the number of parcels and say how many signed the petition, that's 63%. But if we go back and actually figure out, okay, this parcel has this much lineal frontage and this one, and add that up, it equates to 55%.
So you do 2 screens on the petitions.
Yes, but the screen that counts is under Public Act 246 is the lineal frontage screen. That's the one, as the act reads, it has to be more than 50% of the lineal frontage for the properties that are proposed to be included in SAD.
And so that was presented also well, I see the boundaries. The boundary slide, but the one that we were looking at last. Yeah, so this one, because what I was trying to do mathematically is like, in my mind, trying to determine how successful this is going to be based on the number here, the number of not property owners, but plots, if you would. Because I, quickly going, how successful is that going to be? Because what is the cost to us? I know that we're required to do that. Who eats the cost if they're successfully turn this back? We do?
That's a fair question. I do not know. I do not know, should there be a petition for reconsideration, a valid petition presented to the road commission. And again, that would prompt the scheduling of another public hearing. So there would be the submittal of a petition for reconsideration. The board would set a date, time, and location for another public hearing.
Yes.
And then at that point, the board would make the final determination again and say, okay, we're moving forward with this or we're not moving forward with this. And it's a fair question. I do not know with the expenses, the costs that have already been incurred by the road commission. I don't know who would pay for that.
Right. 'cause
We've
that's-
paid for it at this point.
That's what I'm thinking about, the man hours that have already been put into this thus far
Right.
with the engineers and everyone. It's already costly,
Yes,
who bears that
Yep.
cost?
I do not know.
Do you have an answer, Cheryl?
Yeah, I believe that it's our organization.
We absorb it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, Gloria, but because we haven't done this since I've been here. If we turn this down this afternoon
Yes,
and it never goes any further, then we will be paying everybody that's involved,
right.
postage and all that good stuff. But because I happen to be here when the people in 45, you said her name and I don't.
Yep, Anna, yep.
She made and that's why I drove down to see what it actually looked like. And I realized because 45 is a corner lot. So there, that $11,000 that she came up with, 11,500, I think, would be their share. I was thinking, what? That seems wholly disproportionate for a subdivision assessment, but they've got two sides.
Well, but again, in this particular case, the assignment of the cost is per parcel is what was decided previous.
Okay.
So it's per parcel. It's not based on lineal frontage. That is allowed under Public Act 246. You can assign it, and as Matt mentioned, it can be assigned based on lineal frontage, but that was not the decision of the board previous. The decision was set it by parcel. So in that case, an overall construction estimate is put together, and then it's divided by the number of parcels, 68 parcels, right? Yeah. Yeah, and if you jump just back to the previous slide, so again, just to touch on this, these are the roads that would be included in the proposed SAD. So you can see the list there, and that adds up to 1.55 miles of subdivision road. Yep. Okay, next slide.
So,
Next one.
so if they decide after, there's an initial estimate provided to them, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And we reviewed that at the hearing of objections.
But that's not actual,
Correct,
So
because we
it's-
have to go through the advertisement, the bidding.
right?
And know what those actual contracted unit costs are going to be.
So if the actual number far exceeds what these 68 parcel owners are willing to carry,
Mhm.
when can they pull the plug on the whole project
So
at that
if,
point?
sure, and a very good question. If the construction bids would come in and reflect an increase of more than 10% over the engineer's estimate, that would trigger another public hearing, and we would discuss it with the residents that here's where the number actually came in. We were very thoughtful, as we always are, in putting together an engineer's estimate. But again, that is just an estimate. We do
Right.
our best to assign unit prices. The vast majority of the cost for the work that's proposed here, and Michelle will get into that, is in the milling of this pavement, the removal of the pavement through milling, and then the asphalt paving, the actual cost for the construction of the asphalt pavement. We have seen a fair amount of increased unit pricing in asphalt pavement prices. And it's not surprising based on what's going on in our world right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but this is more getting into the nuts and bolts of the work that's being proposed. So Michelle, if you'd like to review this, please.
Okay, I'll go through this quickly because I know that we have more questions on the process probably than the actual scope of the work. So these are just some existing condition pictures out here to show you that the residents believe that based on the condition of these roads, they would like them repaired. So when we went out, we made an assessment and concurred that these are in poor condition. We looked at the different types of stresses that they had, the kind of cracking, all of that to determine, we think, for instance, that the base underneath the asphalt is still in pretty good condition. So we wouldn't have to add that, but we do feel that probably all of this asphalt needs to be removed. So go on to the next slide. So we looked at what could our possible treatments be. Crack seal, they've done a lot of that. They were very proactive with that and did a good job. But the roads were accepted by the board here in 1999. And so they've reached the end of their service life. And so even with good above normal maintenance, they still reach the end of their life. We could seal coat them, chip seal and fog seal. That is an option. However, we think that doesn't address the underlying structural condition of the asphalt and that these are beyond that particular option. So we could mill and resurface. There's about 4 inches of asphalt out there. We went out and did cores of the asphalt. Sometimes we take just the top layer off, only 2 inches. This is bad enough that we think we would need to remove all 4 inches of the asphalt. We can do that by milling, or we could also pulverize and resurface. So you can take a machine out there, basically grind up the asphalt, pulverize it, and then put new asphalt over the top. That can be a very good option, and we have used in the past in these special assessment districts. However, what the pulverization does, because you're leaving that underlying asphalt that you've ground up, it fluffs everything up a little bit. Out in this particular subdivision, the majority of the driveways are concrete. And so we want to keep the elevation of the road the same as it is now, so that we're not impacting those concrete drives. Because something that would cause additional cost to them is if we had to go in, take out 10, 15 feet of their driveway to give them a different slope. It's unnecessary. The driveways are in quite good condition. And some of them even have decorative things. They have pavers around them or things like that, which is what has led us to the option of milling and resurfacing. So these are just pictures. Milling, you are familiar with that. They go in, they grind it out. They have this big chute that shoots it into a truck, and they truck it away. And then we would pave it with 4 inches of asphalt. That would be a 2-inch layer and then another 2-inch layer. And we also have recommended to them that they put in 2-foot aggregate shoulders. And this is to give structural stability to the edges of that asphalt. If you don't put the shoulders in, they are prone to cracking along the edge. It looks kind of like a scallop, and they can then, as water gets in, it breaks off the edges. So there was some question on these shoulders because it would go into their lawns a couple of feet. Should they do it or not do it? And they saw this place didn't do it and everything. So we told them some SADs have elected not to do it, and there has been resultant cracking. So our recommendation is that they do it. When you look at the overall cost, it really is a minor portion of it, because as Aaron mentioned, the majority of this cost, probably about 80% of it, is in the hot mix asphalt. And then you add the milling in, and they're gonna mill an asphalt either way. So the shoulders are a minimal expense, and they add a lot of structural life to the asphalt. And it should not impact their mailboxes. It should be within that, so they shouldn't have to relocate their mailboxes.
Did you have a question?
Yes, just a quick one, just a couple. Do the homeowners have the option of deciding whether or not they want to pulverize or remill?
We did not give them that option. We used our engineering judgment on that. So, I mean, that's part of the preliminary engineering as we go in. The cost would be very comparable. So from that perspective, it wouldn't change. The difference would be, like I said, that fluffing up that would impact their driveways that we didn't feel that they would want that done. It would increase the cost, and people just don't like the driveways getting ripped into.
Yeah, and one other note in regards to that question. When we reviewed the condition of the asphalt, and Michelle mentioned that we actually pulled pavement cores, so we could look at the asphalt and determine the thickness. We don't see, based on the surface appearance, we don't see an underlying aggregate base concern. It's just that this asphalt material has worn itself out. Right. And so if we had seen indication that there were underlying base issues with the base that was placed when the roads were constructed, we may have further considered pulverizing that material and leaving it in place to add additional base to this. But again, just looking at this, the existing conditions, we don't see that. At least it doesn't appear to us to be an underlying like aggregate base issue here.
And then also my second question was, are the homeowners responsible for the maintenance of this improvement?
Of the roadways,
Yes, ma'am.
the road commission is responsible for normal maintenance. So we do our plowing of the roads, pothole repair. But anything above normal, such as crack sealing,
Right.
that is on the residents. That's the same as it would have been without this SAD.
Okay. Thank you.
So we did discuss that at the hearing of objections and told them if they want to get another 20+ years out of it, that they should consider such above normal maintenance.
Thank you very much.
Emily?
Still needs to be chip sealed every 5 years, or 4 years or something.
Yeah.
So, scope of work, just for your information, there is a strange inlet filter. It's a drainage beehive. You've seen them in the middle of a ditch. It collects
I saw that.
water. So when we did an investigation on the culverts and such out there, one of the things we found is Aaron and I went out and we looked at this, we're like, what is that? It looks like a fire pit or something. It's a drainage structure that an inlet filter is just a piece of fabric that we put in during construction to help keep out sediment. For whatever reason, 20 some years ago, when the developer did this, that inlet filter was never removed. So this particular structure has never worked properly. And we think that could be one of the reasons, I assume a resident possibly came and put these rocks around it or whatever, we're not sure, but we're going to fix that. So that should work as designed. And then we'll do some turf restoration, anything that's disturbed. And when we do turf restoration, we mean we put grass seed on and some like mulch blanket that is not sod. We just plant grass seed, and it does have a requirement for grass to grow before the contractor is paid for that. And then it will maintain mail delivery, trash pickup, and access to their homes throughout. They'll be required to have them. So what's not included, no driveways. That was one of our things. I said, especially because the majority of the driveways out here are concrete, and that is a lot more expense that we did not feel was necessary. And no curb and gutter work unless there is some sort of damage at the front coming off of Judd Road on the northern edge. There is some curb and gutter. Our contractors are pretty experienced with removing asphalt and replacing it without disturbing that curb and gutter. It's in pretty good condition now, so it would only be changed if it happened to get hurt. We have heard from residents at the hearing of objections. There's a couple of spots on some at some of the intersections within the subdivision that they think may benefit from some curb and gutter. That's something that we will investigate further if the board decides to move forward with the process. We haven't gone out and evaluated that at this time. But there'll be no culvert work. We did hire a contractor to go out and televise and clean out the culverts that were there. This is underneath the roads, because if we're going to be out there anyway, now's the time to do it. They were actually in very good condition. They're concrete culverts, and they were in good shape. And so we decided a replacement was not necessary, which saved the residents a whole lot of money. Emily? So when we did all this, the estimated cost of construction was $663,500. May sound like a lot. Once again, asphalt is quite expensive. 1.5 miles of roads is 4 inches thick, is quite a lot of asphalt, and that's what drives that. The total cost, then add on to that our design costs. We went and had the culverts done. We have inspection during construction to make sure that they are doing it correctly. There'll be some material testing of the asphalt to make sure it's meeting MDOT standards. Add it all together, take that $746,500 divided by 68 as we're doing the parcel allocation. It comes out to just under $11,000. And as mentioned before, that is an estimate. The actual cost will be known after the actual bidding and the bond sale. So any other questions on the scope?
Are these 10-year bonds?
Yes, 10-year, correct. All right, Aaron.
Thank you. So as mentioned previous, the hearing of objections was on March 2nd. Participants, there were 10 individuals here in person, not counting myself and Matt and Michelle. And there were 33 individuals that participated virtually on Zoom. The questions and comments were reflected in the meeting minutes from that meeting that were provided to the board. We were posed some questions that were related to the scope and the construction. And then there were more questions about the SAD boundaries, who is included, why they're included, how the assessment works, those type of questions were fielded as well. Statements of objection have been received. So those were received at the meeting, have been received via email since the meeting, or we also had an online form that we talked about at that hearing of objections. So there have been objections raised, and the objections are either objecting to the project or they're objecting to being included in the assessment roll, having to pay for the improvements. By and large, the objections that have been voiced to us have been from the property owners that are along Judd Road, that have Judd Road addresses. There have been a couple of other property owners that are within the HOA, that are within the subdivision further back off of Judd Road, that have raised question with the timing of the work. One gentleman was very adept and recognized that the cost of construction is rising and asked if this is the most appropriate time to be bidding work such as this. Another gentleman pointed out that when he built his home in the subdivision, and he was one of the first to build a home in the subdivision in 1999, that the developer told him at that point not to worry about the roads, that the road commission would take care of the roads. And again, we did not really have much of a response to that because, again, taking care of the roads is a very broad term. And as I pointed out earlier in the presentation, we do not have money for that purpose. We do routine, regular maintenance. We do not do maintenance beyond that. Certainly that's what's required here if these roads are going to be improved.
I have a question. Is this subdivision public roads or private roads?
These are public roads. And so the road commission will only consider conducting an SAD process on streets that are public.
Okay.
For the benefit of, if I may,
Please.
for the benefit of my fellow commissioners that weren't necessarily attending that
Chat session?
chat session on Wednesday, the objection that, what's her name again?
Anna Stevens.
Anna Stevens was most vociferous about, and let me say that she was very polite, very, very, very polite and thoughtful.
Yes.
At least when she was talking there. I
And
hope
with
she
me
was
as well,
with you.
yes.
Was that her parents or her in-laws'
Right.
parents' home was only blocked from access to Judd Road directly when we built that new bridge spanning the Ann Arbor Railroad out there. I don't remember, I mean, I was here when we built that bridge. I don't remember, but I suspect that she's correct.
And I'm glad you raised the question. And we did look back at that because we've had a couple of residents raise that issue.
Right.
And actually that unpaved private drive
Right.
that those three properties come off of. Yeah,
Right.
Emily, if you could scroll back to that. So 43, 42, and 45 use a single unpaved private drive. They actually connected to that cul-de-sac prior to the bridge project in
Did they?
2006. And
No.
we looked back at the bridge project plans. My recollection, I worked on the bridge in 2006, but my memory is not near as good enough to remember something like that. So I did look at that. We looked at the aerials that are available on the Washtenaw County website. And I actually just received today an email from the resident there in lot 43, Mr. Merckx, and he stated in his email that that driveway was connected to the subdivision prior to the bridge project taking place. The only driveway that was affected by the bridge project on this side of the road was number 44. That resident's last name is Halleck. And so Mr. Halleck did have a driveway that went onto Judd Road. And when we did the bridge project, because of the grade change in the road, his driveway, we moved it onto Meadow Ridge Drive. Yep.
at the organization's cost, right?
That's correct. At the time we built the bridge, we paid for his driveway to be relocated. Yep. But again, to your point,
That doesn't
the
seem to be
residents-
altogether accurate.
right, now they were made to connect to the subdivision when the subdivision was constructed back in 1999. And I can't speak to what prompted that. They had a driveway, a private drive that went out to Judd Road. And after the subdivision was constructed, they were told or made to put their driveway onto the cul-de-sac inside the subdivision.
And I'd also point out, if those are 10-year bonds, hearing, then that $11,000 price tag, which Ms. Stevens pointed out, my parents-in-law are not in a position to write an $11,000 check. Well, that's fine. It's $1,000 a year.
Right.
It's change for the 10 years. So it's not like we're gonna be driving somebody out of their house.
Right.
And they do have the option, once we would get to that point, after the bidding of the project and after the bond sales, then the property owners would have the option of paying it up front, or they can spread that payment out, but there are percentage rate, there's a cost to that if they spread it over 10 years.
There's a picture there of the process that was clearly taken over here at Wing Drive when we did that, because I recognize L. Weir. But on that particular one, and I don't remember, was that one too, Cheryl, do you remember that? Was that 246 project? I think it was too. What I remember was that a huge percentage of the people in that district paddled over here and wrote us a check as soon as they got one in the mail. There was no, we're not going to pay this later, we're going to pay this now, thank you very much. Here's a check. But to Ms. Stevens' point about her in-laws' ability to pay, we're not asking or requiring that they pay $11,000 the day we finish the project or whatever.
Correct.
You said at 100, above 110% of the engineer's estimate, there's an automatic
Yes.
reconsideration of the
There'd be
project.
another public hearing set, so we could further discuss where the actual cost is estimated to come in.
Those are the salient points to me.
Okay, let's move along.
Sure, we're almost to the end. So the apportionment, and again, this has been referenced previous, but it's the allowable methods to apportion assessment under Public Act 246 is by parcel, by lineal frontage, or by acreage. The Road Commission Board previously decided under one of the prior resolutions that this would be by parcel. And this SAD is divided equally by parcel. So we talked about the overall engineer's estimate and then dividing that by 68 parcels. There was a question raised at the hearing of objections about, could this be based on a tax valuation? Could they look at the assessed value of property and say, well, your share is based on the value of your property? And for SADs that are administered by the Road Commission under Public Act 246, that's not an option that's allowed to us.
Good question, good answer.
And so today,
Did the homeowners have an opportunity to select their apportionment?
no, the homeowners, again, based on the overall actual cost of the project after the bid advertisement and bid opening, then the engineer's estimate would be recalculated based on those unit prices. And then that would be divided equally among all 68 parcels.
I mean, they didn't have an opportunity to decide whether it's gonna be by parcel, by lineal frontage, or by acreage, but that was a decision made by our office.
That's right. That decision is made by the board, by the Road
Okay.
Commission Board.
All right, thank you.
The next steps would be, we've referenced today, a action item has been presented to the board for consideration, the final order of determination. We are recommending, based on all things considered to this point, that the board approve that and move forward with the project. At that point, letters will be sent to all of the impacted property owners, to all those included in the SAD. They'll receive a letter. And then we talked about the petition of reconsideration, and that there's a 10-day window from the point of mailing of that final order. So that would start tomorrow, because we intend to send out that letter tomorrow. Again, assuming the board approves that today. And that petition must be signed by owners of more than 50% of the lineal frontage. And that would prompt the scheduling of another public hearing to further consider the project if we receive that petition.
I have a question at that point.
Okay,
Staff be open to getting the letters mailed today if we pass this resolution? Is that technically conceivable?
Tomorrow.
We need the resolution numbers.
We have to attach the resolution to it. Sorry, the letter requires that the resolution be attached, and plus then we have to print them, get them in envelopes, all that stuff. We thought tomorrow would be a reasonable amount. And in fact, the letter itself, I drafted it yesterday to make sure it's ready. Our 10 calendar days fall on a weekend. And so per previous SADs, we're giving them until the following Monday to submit that petition.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yamas?
I guess, so I hear what the rules are, so people are aware of it now, because there's been a public hearing, right? Because given the mail, we may mail it, but it may not get to them until the 10th day, right?
Right.
The time's over, and yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a previous mailing at the point at which the board set the public hearing for the hearing of objections. All of the residents within the SAD received a letter at that time. We also informed them of that meeting by posting it under Public Act 246. It requires that you post it in 5 conspicuous places within the SAD. And so we had staff go out and put signs up in the SAD. We also used the portable changeable message boards, the big electronic message boards, and put them up. And thankfully, York Timber Ridge only has 2 ways in and out, and we have 2 message boards. So we put one up at each entrance. So to my belief, all of them have been informed that this is being considered. If they're either going to and from home and seeing electronic message boards in front, or receiving the mailing through the postal service.
Okay.
So if by chance a petition of reconsideration is received on the 11th or 12th day, it will be disallowed.
Michelle mentioned that the 10th day actually falls on a weekend, so we would give them until the end of the next business day.
Okay.
But beyond that, yes, under the Public Act, it would not be a valid petition if it was late.
So the 28th, March 28th, pretty much, because I'm looking at the dates. March 26th
that
is
would
a
be correct.
Saturday.
Thank you. Yes.
March 28th is the Monday, as I pull up, sorry, Barb, through you. But I also, just a comment about the dollar amount. It's approximately $917 a month for those that couldn't come up with what would be, to me, right now, the
Year or
lowest
a
bid.
month?
A month.
I think it's a month.
No.
Excuse
Did
me?
I do my math
10-year
wrong?
bond.
No, it's a 10-year. Oh, so it would be 917 a year.
Less than
There you go.
$100 a month.
Less than $100 a year.
A
So it-
month. Less than $100
a month, right? So the 917 would be a yearly thing.
Correct.
Yes, okay. I'm thinking, wait, is that a monthly thing? Holy cow. All right,
No, no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no,
thank
no.
you, my son.
Okay,
all right.
Aaron
Yes.
or Michelle or,
And then, so we would have, if there's no petition of reconsideration is received, the project continues moving forward. There will be construction bid letting, as I mentioned previous. the road commission would enter into a contract with the lowest qualified contractor. There would be a confirmation of the assessment role. And so a public meeting would be held. Again, the board at one of your upcoming meetings would set a date, time, and location for that public hearing. There would be another mailing at that point that would go out to all the property owners. We would be putting the signs up in the SAD. We'd be putting the message boards up to inform residents that there was a meeting for the setting of the assessment roll. And at that point, a property owner can challenge their participation in the SAD or their contribution amount. And the board at that point can make changes to the roll to determine, and Matt provided some clarification on that, if a property is to be either assessed or not assessed for the proposed improvements. And then construction would occur this year, should all those steps proceed.
Does,
Commissioner Fuller?
ordinarily, when we, this commission, lets a contract, we are not obligated to take the low bid.
Correct.
Does 246, because you have, on a couple of occasions, you referenced the low bidder. Does 246 require us to take the low bid?
I don't believe so. I believe we can award the contract to the benefit of the Washtenaw County Road Commission. I believe that's the way it reads, Doug. Yep.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah, just one other option. It requires the project to be bid out, or we have a bid. Another option that we've talked about is we bid out the county-wide work, much like the local road program. They take advantage of those unit prices and them being much lower cost. So it'd be a cost advantage to the residents who want the project. So to get the least amount of cost, we could approach the successful county-wide contractor and say, you have similar items, would you be willing to do this work? And that came up with the hearing as well. So I wanted to
And
make
we
you
think
aware
we
of
can do
that.
that?
Yep.
Great.
But we've got to get through the steps.
Oh, no, I
Yep.
understood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Commissioner Green?
Final question. If there are any defects in workmanship in the project, are we on the hook?
So if there were any defects that would be identified while we're still under contract with the contractor, they would be made to repair those if they're workmanship defects. But really, once that contract is closed, the road commission is not on the hook for further work that would be beyond our regular maintenance work. So, and certainly that's something we're very mindful of. And as Michelle reviewed, we have options here. And as we considered the full removal, the full milling of that existing asphalt that's roughly 4 inches, we could have gone with a cheaper option and said, well, we're just going to mill off 2 inches and repave it. But the reality is those that are paying for this, the residents, would not be happy with that, because based on the conditions we've observed, if we were to do simply a 2-inch mill and fill here, the cracks that are underlying that are going to come through the top. And understandably, they won't be happy with that. So we are very thoughtful in the work and the scope being proposed so that we can, by the means that we have to us, provide a very good product.
Any further questions? No?
Very thorough.
Staff, do you have any close? No? Thank you.
Sure,
Karen.
thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Call to you,
Yes.
Cheryl.
Everybody had a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Very nice
Thank you very
presentation.
much. Yes.
All right, we have given you a lot of information this morning. So we have a very brief time before we need to reconvene for the 1 o'clock board meeting. But actually, the contractor who has installed all this technology equipment has very kindly brought in pizza to this organization. So if you want to head down to the lunchroom, it is in the lunchroom. There is pizza downstairs if you want to grab a slice. And obviously Barb will need to be back here pretty quick.
Yeah. So if I could entertain a motion to adjourn the working session.
So
You
moved.
have the motion.
Thank you. Aaron or Emily, roll call,
Oh.
please.
I can do roll call. Commissioner Rod Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas,
Yes.
Commissioner Joanne McCullum,
Yes.
Commissioner Douglas Fuller, and Commissioner Barb Fuller.
Aye. We are adjourned. Please return in time to reconvene at 1 o'clock.